Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday Tips with me, Dr. Delise Coffey. I am committed to bringing you information and bringing people to you to help you be successful in our free throw-a-thon. We're having our first annual Coach Joe Free-Throw-A-Thon in September. September the 8th is the day that it starts, so you can register anytime up until the 8th. And actually, you can continue to register after the 8th, and it ends on the 17th. I'm really excited about this event. Once, because it's the first event, and anytime you're doing something for the first time, it's exciting. So I invite all of you to join us. Today, we're going to bring to the stage Dr. Hearn. Dr. Hearn is a professional athlete turned sports medicine doctor. So he has some great nuggets to share with us. So I'm going to bring him on stage right now. Okay, not sure what's going on here, but just bear with me. I am bringing him on stage, or figuring out how to bring him on stage. I'm not sure where my little link went. There it is. And here he comes. Hi, Dr. Hearn.
How you doing? Good to see you again.
Yes, it took me a minute to bring you on stage. It seemed like my buttons keep moving around. So
no worries.
Thank you for joining us. I share with my viewers that you'll be joining us, and you are a former professional athlete, and now you're a sports medicine doctor, which both of them are just super amazing. But one thing that I know a lot of athletes are interested in is, what does it take to be a sports medicine doctor? That's just really impressive. And, I've known you for a short period of time, but I am just so proud of you. I am so proud of you of taking that to the next level. Not only did you get general knowledge in it, you went on to get a doctoral degree in that field, which makes you an expert. Whether you want to claim it or not, you are an expert in that field. So we are so blessed to have you come on board. So let's start there. Just talk about, what does it take to be a sports medicine doctor? And then you can just share whatever you would like to share with our viewers.
First and foremost, thank you for having me. I appreciate you as always. It's always good seeing you and catching up with you. Second, I never claim to be an expert. I always feel like there's something to be learned out there in the world, new material, technology changes. Everybody's body reacts a little bit differently also. So for me, sports medicine wise, physical therapy, Chinese medicine, started off with a bachelor's in kinesiology, moved to kind of the business route for my master's. Then I went into being a doctor of physical therapy and a doctor of Chinese medicine and acupuncture. So what led me down that path, of course, was, being an athlete, playing at the an elite level, high school, college, professionally, overseas. Didn't make it to the NBA, unfortunately, but everything happens for a reason. I had a few injuries that kind of stopped me and halted my career, and also kind of hindered me for the most part during college and professionally. So my interest of the body kind of grew. So I was going to all these different places looking for help, and ended up with these same type of people, these same visions, these same mindsets, and I just felt like there was something different. So the Western side and the Eastern side became a blend for me. Mm-hmm. And that's what led me into dealing with more athletes and regular everyday athletes, individuals basically on an everyday basis, and combining the two Western and Eastern medicines. So for me, I pride myself on really just relying on, how to do things the right way. It's easy to have somebody just say, okay, go and get surgery, or take this pill, take that pill. But, the body is very complicated, as you know, Doc, so, and the body's also meant to heal itself. But we have to do our job too, whether that's from a nutritional standpoint, mental health standpoint, or a physical standpoint, physical training. So that kind of covers how I got into this for the most part.
Awesome. That's amazing. Now, Chinese medicine, that's an area that I've been interested in. I haven't actually done anything in it or done any research, but that's something that I'm personally interested in. So share with us a little bit more, because I know if I'm interested in it, there's other people out there that may be interested in it as well. So talk to us about Chinese medicine and how it helps the athletes.
Chinese medicine is such a broad spectrum. And when I say a broad spectrum, it's really the total opposite of Western medicine. Don't get me wrong, I love Western medicine. Western medicine has its purposes. You know, Western medicine is usually associated with emergency purposes for the most part. Chinese medicine is more preventative medicine. So Chinese medicine goes into daily nutrition. It goes into yin and yang. I'm pretty sure a lot of the listeners and viewers are familiar with, you know, when you see the little, you know, black and white, you know, that yin and yang type of aspect. Well, that's the balance, you know, both mentally, physically, and spiritually. You know, and all that plays into the part for a young athlete. You know, a lot of young athletes just think of it as physical, you know, train my muscle, beat myself up, and then be prepared, you know, for the playing field. But there's a mental aspect there. There's a nutritional aspect there. So in Chinese medicine feels like everything has a purpose. You know, everything that you put in your body has a purpose. You know, so whether that be, you know, food, stretching, acupuncture, herbs. So in Chinese medicine, we deal a lot with herbs a lot. So the weirdest herbs, you know, that you've ever heard of, you know, that have never probably entered America, or you won't see at your grocery store or whatever the case might be. So these are combinations that we use for, you know, teas and powders and granules, you know, that you take on a day-to-day basis, depending on what's going on with your body. So Chinese medicine, we basically go into the body and we look at you from an organ system. You know, you have liver, kidney, spleen, stomach, heart, you know, these different major organs that all play a vital part in your body, again, whether that be day-to-day or from an athletic standpoint. And we figure out where you're deficient and where your excess at. So with finding out where you're deficient at, we're trying to make that stronger, and finding out where your excess at, we're trying to deplete it to get you back to a certain balance. Again, coming back to that yin and yang aspect.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you touched on this just a little bit, but I want to go a little bit deeper. When a player comes to you, just give us an example of a type of player that comes to you. Like, let's say a player is come to you returning to play from an injury. Take us from point A all the way up until, you know, treatment is really never over, in my opinion, because you're always doing it. But take us to the point to where they're able to function on their own and just kind of consult with you, because in the beginning, I know you're working with them on a regular basis. So let's walk that client in your door for the first day and walk them all the way out till you get to a point that you all are just consulting and maintaining.
Okay, so first and foremost, I'm looking for problematic areas, you know, when a client walks through the door. And I'm also trying to figure out what their goal is, you know, or better yet, my primary question is, where do you want to be? You know, where do you see yourself? Where do you want to be? Because at the end of the day, like, athletes know their bodies better than anybody. You know where it was that you were, you know, prior to an injury. You know what you're capable of, and you know where you're trying to go. So my question is always, okay, where are you trying to go? And like, were you ever there, or is this a new territory? So with that being said, my next question is, okay, where does it hurt, or what are the injury sites? You know, usually as an athlete, again, you have high pain thresholds, you know, so we always try to play through something or power through something, you know, where the body's specifically telling us, you know, something is happening or something is breaking it down. But we never really notice until it gets severe. You know, that comes with the sprained ankle, that comes with the ACL injury, MCL, whatever the case might be. All of those things stem from something. What I've also found is in my practice is that a lot of injury sites aren't the problem. So if you really notice or pay attention, ACL injuries are really common in the sport of basketball. Also, you know, sprained ankles. But for the most part, I would say ACL injuries don't really stem from the knee. They usually stem from an imbalance of quadriceps and hamstrings. Basketball is a very quad dominant sport. So with that being said, the posterior portion of the body, when I say posterior, I mean the back. So that means glutes and hamstrings aren't activated, the way that they should be, which cause a muscle imbalance. So it's like this: when you have something that's overworking, like let's just say a job, or I'll give the example of school. Mm-hmm. If you're in a group setting and the teacher's asking you to do a project, and it's two of you guys in this group project, but you're holding the most weight, you're going to get tired, right? You're going to fatigue out, you're going to feel like you're producing more, while the other person is just sitting back there playing video games or going about their own regular life. So that's that coordination between, quad and hamstring. They both have to work equally. If not, one is susceptible to injury. So it doesn't have to be the stronger muscle or the weaker muscle. Either way it goes, they can both get injured. Mm-hmm. That's where the balance comes into play. So you see pulled hamstrings, you see ACL, MCL. Those are muscle imbalances. Another uncommon injury or uncommon muscle that's worked are the adductors. Adductors are very lost when it comes to sports in general, because again, a lot of people want to work on the big muscle groups, glutes, quads, core muscles are also formed because a lot of people think superficial muscles, which are the abs, they think washboard, where you have your internal and small muscles, which are the most important, that are along the spine. Multifidus, those muscles are your most important because those are consistent workers. But to go back to your question, Doc, on walking them through in the door, those are like my two main questions. After that, it's assessment time. So now I'm trying to see range of motion, flexibility, mobility, and strength. So I walk them through certain tests that test all of these different things. Because with athletes, you have to show them. You can't just tell them. Mm-hmm. So with this testing aspect, I'm showing you where your deficiencies are, where your inability of range of motions, mobility, and strength, and then you basically put a program together to say, all right, we start foundationally first with flexibility and mobility, because without those two, you can't develop strength and power. Then from there, we're looking at pain. So we always have to look at pain and associate pain with how the body heals properly. Mm-hmm. My goal is always to have an athlete or a client to be pain-free. Mm-hmm. So you always want to play pain-free, because that's what the ultimate goal. Now, if you're in mid-season, if you're in end of season, you're going to have some nagging injuries. But if you're in off season, there's no reason you should be in off season playing or doing your strength and conditioning in pain. That's your time to rest and to recuperate. Playing season is totally different. After that, there's the maintenance aspect. There's the homework aspect. There is, okay, we've gotten you to a point where you're, 85, 90, 95%. I always say no one's ever 100, unless you're a baby fresh out the womb, because, if you've ever seen a baby squat, a toddler squat, like their squat is amazing. Like they just, so, 85, 90, 95% is where we're trying to get to. And we're trying to maintain that. So there's homework associated, because playing a sport, there's always complications. So we're looking at, okay, are we stretching the calves enough? Are we stretching quads enough? Hamstrings, what exercises are we doing in our off time? What machines, what movements? Because again, everybody's built different. Mm-hmm. So when you look on Instagram, when you look on Facebook, and everybody's recommending, do this exercise, do this exercise, do this exercise. Well, you haven't been assessed the proper way. Those exercises don't apply to you because, again, you don't know where you're excess or deficient, where you're stronger at. If you know that, great for you, then you can work on those things. But if you don't, you can't just go and just do it exercises because it looks cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing. This is some good stuff. So another thing here, again, you touched on this, but I want to deep dive again. My brother is a coach and he has an AAU team. He's also a high school coach and he coaches mostly girls. So with his AAU team, of course, I'm working with the girls as well. So I come in contact with a lot of girls, a lot of female athletes. And I just know in general, females are prone to knee pain. And in saying that, I've had two knees that tore their ACL. One has recovered and she's back to play, doing wonderfully. And one, she tore ACL twice. So she's in recovery now. So let's talk a little bit more about how to prevent a knee injury, more specifically with women. And then just kind of a side note here, I'm trying to get some personal information too. I have knee pain, but I've never had an injury. I've had it since I was in my 20s. So, I kind of run or exercise, do what I need to do. When it stopped pain, I, nurse myself back to have to keep going. So I just find that quite interesting. It's just kind of a pain that's there. But I think it all kind of ties together because of our anatomy and how we're built. So just share with us some preventative things that women can do, more specifically. Men, I love you to death, but I'm talking to the ladies now that we can do to kind of keep it going.
I think you're right. Yes, both are built different in a sense. You talk about quick twitch muscles and the pelvis and just the anatomy of female and male is different. So I'll say this: what I found is that strengthening female's pelvic floor, and again, making sure, because again, when you talk about the quads, you have lateralis, medialis, and then rectus femoris. What you find is a lot of times is that rectus femoris and lateralis on female is a lot tighter and stronger than medialis. So there is some lack of compensation there. When you think about the things that you do, so like yourself, running, squatting, lunging, all of those things depend on foot placement, knee placement, hip placement, and just body placement and angles, period. So a lot of people think a lunge is a lunge, a squat is a squat. That's not the truth, because depending on how you're presenting or putting pressure on your foot is depending on where that goes to in your lower body. If I'm on my toes on the balls of my feet, I'm going to present more pressure in my quads or strengthen my quads more. That's what you're doing. If I'm sitting back on the middle of my foot and heel, now I put more weight through my glutes and hamstrings, basically. So a lot of it is placement. But to answer your question, pelvic floor for sure. Things such as like glute bridges. I love to do isolated things. Glutes are very powerful. So it takes a lot of weight and resistance to turn glutes on. That's what a lot of people don't get. So even when you're doing squats and lunges, just body weight doesn't turn glutes on. What you're doing is you're really just working your quads. So again, I like to isolate. So I like to do single leg things, because single leg also forces you to create stability, in certain areas, whether that's hip, knee, and ankle. So I do a lot of isolation work with my ladies, with my female clients, as well as my males, because honestly, again, like, depends on the sport. And that's how I train and that's how I operate, depending on what sport it is. So we do a lot of athletic movements that are power movements or primary movements in that sport. So yeah, I think that kind of answers your question. I hope it did, at least.
Yeah.
So single leg and isolation things are really important, for women, especially in the posterior chain for sure, and the bottom half of the body, hip down, because you guys are actually a lot more powerful than us from the bottom down.
Well, yes, that totally answers the question. Thank you so much. Now, if you all have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. And then if for some reason I don't get to it while we're actually live here with Dr. Hearn, I'll make sure he gets your questions. This is just a wonderful opportunity to get some questions answered. So feel free to chat me up while we're actually here online. The other thing, Dr. Hearn, it takes a lot to do what you have done and what you're doing. Share with us how you built your confidence, or how you just kept your confidence up through your journey of being an athlete and now a professional helping athletes.
I think once you get past the fact that they're athletes and you just look at them as human beings, the athletic portion kind of goes out the window, because technically what I do is I break all of my athletes down to phase one, ground root, the same I would do with a regular person walking through the door. The difference is that athletes learn and recover quicker. So that program that would be 12 weeks for a regular person is probably 5, for an athlete. So you have to always challenge athletes, because athletes are always looking to be challenged. That's just a competitive nature for them and for us in general. So working with professional athletes, it's really just the confidence level of knowing your craft. When you're confident in your craft, it shows. When you're not confident, it shows also. So it's the studying, it's the experience, it's the, there's trials and error. I'm not going to sit up here and say that I know everything, but because I don't, but what I do is I go into my research and my learnings, and I go and I figure it out, or try to. Honesty is always key with athletes, because they're trying to get better. And if you can't get them better, then you need to let them go and find somewhere else or someone else that can better them. I'm not a surgeon, I'm not any other type of doctor. So I stay in my niche and in my lane. I don't go and bash anyone else in their profession or career settings, but I am good at what I do to a certain extent also. So that's why those guys like me, because I'm kind of a one-stop shop. With what I do, you have to kind of go and see 3 different people with my, type of, I guess, experience in a sense. So I'm almost like a Walmart, I guess you would say, a one-stop shop. That's what I like to call myself.
That is awesome. That's awesome. And then another thing that I know you can share with our viewers, some great information, is you work with amateur athletes all the way up to professional athletes. You've been an amateur athlete all the way up to the professional athlete. So those that want to take the journey that's amateur now to professional, how can they stay focused and get from point A to point B? Well, actually, that's point Z once you make it to professional.
Yeah, there is, how can I explain this? It's very hard to explain, but I'm gonna try to explain this the best way I can. So there's a certain discipline, sacrifice, and work ethic that you have to go from amateur to professional. You kind of almost have to channel a different person in a sense. Like the sacrifice level that goes into being a professional athlete is second to none. You have to eat, sleep, drink, walk, and talk it. There's no way around it. There are some out here that are gifted and have been given, certain gifts, by God, but at the end of the day, work ethic will always overcome talent. So going from amateur to professional, like I said, discipline, sacrifice, and work ethic are key. And you have to eat, sleep, drink, and breathe it. You also have to have a manifestation. I think manifestation, this is going back into, Chinese medicine and the spiritual realm. Like, this is the mental aspect. Because if you don't believe it and you don't see it, you won't conquer it. A lot of those guys, and there's also the mental aspect of it has to be stronger than the physical, because your body's gonna break down. You're not going to feel 100% every day you wake up. You're not gonna want to work out every day, but it's consistency. The consistency has to be there. Every day I have to want to get better, and I have to be honest with myself. Honesty is key. If you're just working out and doing the same thing every day, and you're working on your strengths instead of your weaknesses, you're not being honest with yourself, and you won't get better. So you need people around you that aren't going to be yes men and are going to give you honest feedback and are going to critique you. And you have to be able to take that feedback. So that's why you have to have people around you that you trust to be able to give you good feedback, good, healthy feedback. You know, I'm not talking about the negativity, like, no, good, healthy feedback. So yeah, that's my angle on amateur and professional. And consistency, like I said, is very key. You know, it's an everyday process, whether that's eating the proper way, getting your sleep in, getting your water in, you know, doing your workout, studying film on mechanics, or, you know, just knowing when to shut down. So a lot of those are key factors.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So yes, as you all can see, once you come into the D Coffey Foundation, these are the type of people that we connect with. We connect with people that can take you to the next level. So once you're into the foundation, if there's something that we don't do, then we have the resources and the connections to refer you to that person. So it's about a holistic approach. When we say we do a holistic approach to player development, we mean that literally. We leave no stone uncovered. If you notice on my website, one of the last services we provide is Wraparound Services. And what that is, that's connecting you and linking you to any service that we do not provide under our umbrella. And once we link you to that person, we assign you an accountability coach to make sure that you get there and to make sure that you follow through with what they're telling you to do. So when we say holistic, we mean holistic from in every sense possible. So with that being said, you know our free throw-a-thon is coming up, our first annual Coach Joe Free-Throw-A-Thon, and you all just know I'm just super excited about this.
Yeah.
So we want you to be successful in this free throw-a-thon. That's one reason we're doing these Tuesday tips. But the beauty about the Tuesday tips is once the event is over with, you can use this same information to continue to soar to the top of your game in your sport or in your life. So as we close out with Dr. Hearn, will you leave us with some tips that they can use to be successful in our Coach Joe Free-Throw-A-Thon?
Consistency again, you know, consistency, focus, and believe in yourself. You gotta believe in yourself. You gotta, you know, see those shots going in, you know, and follow through, hold that follow through.
Awesome. Thank you again, Dr. Hearn, for joining me. I will be in contact. I think we first met at a sports summit, and I was just impressed with just the presentation. So as you see, I'm staying in contact with you.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you. It's
Yes,
good having people like you in the industry, and I love what you're doing with this right now. So I'm a
Thank
firm
you.
believer in it.
Thank you so much. All right. And I will be in touch soon. Thank you.
You guys have a good one.
All right. Bye now.
Take care.